So those rascally scamps at the Daily Wire are at it again, and by it, I mean pretending to be a successful or even competent entertainment company. Hey, remember Mr. Bircham, a series that pretty much only exists now to remind people how truly soul-crushing adult animation could be? Or how about Lady Ballers, the poorly made raunchy comedy that was neither raunchy nor very funny? Hey, Jeremy, quick tip, brevity is the soul of wit, so next time you make a 2-hour plus vanity project, maybe trim some out a little bit, okay? You're putting a wig on Matt Walsh, you're not taking a ring to Mordor, honey. And you might remember my little tiff with the Daily Wire over my review of Lady Ballers, which, despite reaching pretty high in Google results and on YouTube right after the film's release, was very quickly copyright stricken for just using footage from the trailer. But that's okay. That's all in the past. I'm not bitter over it. No, I'm bitter over the fact that they put out a new movie, and this time it's in theaters. Granted, I've seen some real dog water movies this year, including the Christian nationalist propaganda piece about the Bible being illegal and the green screen Spirit Halloween costuming department bonanza that was The Firing Squad. So how will Matt Walsh's latest foray into pretending to be a documentarian rank up against those? I don't know yet. But just based on his previous work, I'm willing to bet it'll be another limp approximation of Borat filled with confirmation bias and Matt and his team editing interviews out of context to support their core arguments, facts be damned. It makes sense that the Daily Wire is making their big theatrical debut with Matt Walsh's latest film, Am I Racist?, given the success of What is a Woman?, the film that led to the astroturfed viral slogan that divorced Facebook uncles all over the world still love posting in comment sections. What is a Woman is also notable for having lied to its subjects to get its interviews, which most people would say is bad journalism. I highly recommend Jesse Ginger's video on Matt Walsh and What is Woman, and I consider it kind of the definitive breakdown of everything wrong with his approach to documentary. See, the problem with Matt's exploration of these subjects is that he never embarks upon his journey with any degree of actual curiosity. His explorations come from a point of already having his mind made up before he goes out to interview his subject. So everything he's doing is just to confirm an opinion he already had. Yet, while What is a Woman was filled with intentional obfuscations, outright lies, and misinterpretations, that didn't stop it from appealing to conservatives because it seems like that's kind of all their favorite things. And so Matt turned his bearded eye to another subject of his regular ire, people of color, specifically DEI, which gives us his new film, Am I Racist?, which purports to be a in-depth investigation of the DEI industry, and I'm willing to bet is just going to spend a lot of time talking about how, isn't it crazy how these academics charge speaking fees? Look at all the money these teachers are raking in from talking. See, Matt wants people to believe that these documentaries are exposing the real inside truth behind these industries, as he calls them, words that he likes to use for transgender medicine and DEI. The reality is that he loves to nitpick his subjects and force them into positions that intentionally make them look worse so he can use them as scapegoats for an entire philosophy or idea or way of living that he really, again, had no interest in learning about in the first place. Something that will undoubtedly happen in Am I Racist? With Robin DiAngelo. More on that in a minute. It should be noted at this point that I've mentioned in previous videos, but Matt is just not very good at going undercover. He wears this terrible grandma ponytail wig everywhere like it's a calling card or something, but people still just recognize who you are, Matt. And this is coming from somebody who has a little bit of experience going undercover and not being recognized. Am I Racist? Is also another collaboration with director Justin Folk, who not only directed What is a Woman, but the documentary starring Adam Carolla and Dennis Prager, No Safe Spaces, which basically just followed them around to college campuses as they lectured teenagers on why they should be able to, say slurs and shit. And notably before that, Justin Folk also worked on visual special effects for The Matrix Reloaded in 2003. So, everybody at the Daily Wire is a failed entertainer of some degree, so why wouldn't their directors be too? Now, judging by the embarrassing trailer, Matt has embraced his inner Knoxville for the role, going undercover in embarrassing and awkward situations in the name of comedy, you see. Here he is falling over at a dinner full of women talking about racism. Hilarious. But Am I Racist doesn't just promise laughs, oh no, but also to be an expose on the DEI industry, as Matt calls it. As apparently evidenced by Matt's interview with Robin DiAngelo, something he is so proud of, I wouldn't be surprised if he had it put up on his fridge at home. Like, if you go on his Twitter, he has been pumping up so much that he managed to trick this white liberal woman who has not been socially relevant or politically relevant in like 5+ years. For those who don't remember, Robin DiAngelo is most famous for writing a book called White Fragility, which is basically the guidebook to a highly specific brand of hand-wringing white liberalism that, in so many words, blames white people for most racist issues in society, or at least the structures in our culture that tend to favor white people, often unwittingly. Pointing out how white people benefit more than POC from simple things is far from revolutionary activism or philosophy, but when the George Floyd protests broke out, her book saw a massive resurgence in popularity, which I think says a lot about a certain type of moderate white liberal, the same kind of people I saw at protests I went to myself, who wanted to be in the street dancing and protesting, but when time actually came and people needed medical help, or when police started tear gassing people and they needed water, they were nowhere to be found. Now, I don't have time to break down why DiAngelo's arguments are a bit silly, but suffice to say, they come from a place of privileged neoliberalism that doesn't really take into account things like class struggle and commonalities between material realities under capital. White Fragility is a book that, while probably well-meaning, is overly simplistic and caters to an idea that white people can learn their way towards being better people and that will magically fix the problems in society, as opposed to actually learning more about the problems in society themselves. This isn't to say white people shouldn't be aware of how they can unintentionally be biased, or how things they do can unwittingly hold up standards of white homogeneity. But DiAngelo is not the be-all, end-all of talking about diversity, which I think is kind of what Matt Walsh is going to paint her as in this movie. In an NPR review, Columbia professor John McWhorter put it so well, saying, quote, "I think that what Robin DiAngelo is doing is well-intentioned, but I think ultimately is idle. Ultimately, the result of what she would create is a certain educated class of white person feeling better about themselves, and frankly, that's antithetical to her goal, because no matter how she wants to go, people are going to think that they've done some kind of work. It's going to be hard to get people to truly feel as endlessly culpable as she's seeking. And in the meantime, what's the connection between that and forging change? You can say all of this is a prelude to changing structures, but the question will always be, why don't you go out and change the structures? And why do you think you couldn't until doing this?" End quote. Matt Walsh is currently talking a big game on social media about the project, like all Daily Wire talking heads do leading up to their cute little projects. But at the end of the day, I fully expect this to be another loosely assembled series of straw men Matt confidently knocks down to make himself look like a very normal, well-adjusted person, while all those other people are just crazy liberals. Look at this lady paying reparations to a black man, literally. It's so crazy. Or look at what happens when Matt plays up his fake liberal white savior character to a bunch of just regular working class folks.
What do you think about this issue of heteronormativity and how it intersects with the broader structures of racism in society?
Who just react awkwardly when a random person they don't know starts talking about white privilege. Because as long as people like Matt can farce their way through an argument, they don't have to actually engage with the substance of what's being said. I guarantee most of these same people could be easily swayed to agree with points about how white people might benefit more from certain structures, how black people and other people of color undoubtedly face prejudice white people don't experience. Because when framed that way, ideas around DEI and inclusion aren't obtuse, silly ways to hand-wave away the concerns of a minority group. Which is why I'm willing to bet Matt Walsh is not going to try and frame anything in such a light. As always, I'll be happy to be proven wrong, but I'm willing to bet Matt won't be exactly engaging with any ideas around systemic racism or prejudice, or DEI as an investment measure, or the broad support of diversity efforts in the mainstream. I'm willing to bet this will probably take the tone that racism used to be a problem, but is no longer a problem in America. But I don't know for sure. I am currently preparing to see it right now, and studying up to go in prepared, because today I'm watching not one, but two cinematic masterpieces right after the other. This and God's Not Dead 5. Yes. It's like the Christian Sharknado at this point. I wonder if they have Tara Reid in one of them. Anyway, I'll be right back after seeing if Matt Walsh is racist or not. So the film opens with an Ibram Kendi quote about racism, which will be one of many running themes throughout the movie. We then follow Matt Walsh walking over a jaunty tune as he proclaims to be a DEI expert and is welcomed on a local morning news show. He plays up his new role as this DEI expert, specifically mockingly talking about how white people need to acknowledge indigenous land. The fact that most of the land that we have right now was gained through genocide. He then makes up a goofy exercise for the morning news crew to do where they can stretch out their whiteness. Then he pauses the scene to literally do a stop frame and say, I bet you're wondering how I got here. So buckle up for this outrageous comedy, because this is about the level of comedy we can expect. See, Matt and his crew apparently faked credentials and managed to use a fake DEI workshop they started to show how easy it was to grift your way to prominence in this DEI space by appearing on morning shows under false pretenses. So they essentially just lied, wasting the time, effort, and money of everybody at these news studios to prove a point. And they didn't even really prove it, because this was a stunt that they only could have pulled off with the resources of a company like the Daily Wire. This is the brand of outrageous undercover journalism you can expect from pretty much this whole film, where if you think about what's being said or how they had to set it up for 1 second, it kind of stops making sense, because Matt and company are revealed as just disingenuous at best and outright manipulative liars at worst. We cut to an intro sequence before Matt is just sitting in a diner wondering about the mysteries of the universe, where he says, back in the 90s, we never really thought about race, which is a wild fucking thing to say for the decade that gave us the Rodney King riots. Right after this, he notices a TV in the diner talking about race. We get the thesis of the movie that Matt wants to portray issues about systemic racism in America not as genuine issues, but something concocted entirely by media and politicians to get people's money. To get to the bottom of the issue, this sub-average white man decides to go talk to a DEI expert. With a little bit more self-awareness, the idea of a white dude deciding to set out and solve the racism problem once and for all could have actually been an interesting comedic concept for a documentary, but it falls entirely flat because there's no real sincerity to speak of here. Matt is committed to making every encounter as ridiculously embarrassing as possible. The lady he talks to frames racism like D'Angelo in an overly simple way. She says we should talk to kids about racism. Then we spend 10 minutes talking about buying a Moana costume for Matt's kid, and the lady just says she wouldn't. She doesn't say that that makes the kid racist or anything, despite Matt very obviously trying to lead her to saying that. She just said she wouldn't do it personally. That's it. She says America is racist to its bones, which really triggers Matt, and he tries to twist it to make it sound like she said America is explicitly racist, where she is obviously talking more in terms of a metaphor that racism is foundational to America. As she says we have biases, Matt has to say, so am I racist? See, he has to immediately twist what she's saying, trying to make it sound like she said something else. Next up, he decides to go to a bookstore for some reading and picks up some books on anti-racism, most prominent among them being White Fragility, which will play a major role in the movie, as I expected. He also picks up a book with the N-word in the title, and he didn't say it, but I could tell he wanted to. Next up is the scene that you've probably seen footage of, a secret camera support group, which also was the fake support group that Matt made that had the police called because people figured out who he was and he wouldn't leave. So while it's not made clear, what I think happened here was that the Daily Wire entirely staged this racism workshop or whatever, including hiring the speaker, so they could control the environment and film, which is why the police report mentioned taking cameras and phones from the participants. If literally anything these guys tried was admitted as evidence, they would be thrown out like Jazzy Jeff. Now, I want to say some of the way conversations around race are approached is a little silly in this scene, and I think part of that has to do with editing, but also kind of with the way they're approaching the material. Like Robin DiAngelo, it's a lot of very pretentious upper crust liberal waxing about white guilt and being in touch with your inner racism. The framing is silly, but the things said are not only relevant, but obviously taken out of context. Throughout this workshop, you can tell sentences were cut mid-sentence to make it look like a black woman yelling at white people, dealing with discomfort as they come to understand systemic white supremacy. You can actually hear the cuts in the audio as she speaks, so you know for sure how much was cut out. She then says that she doesn't feel safe in all white spaces, and Matt has to ask why, as he's literally trying to undermine her and make her look silly for talking about race, as he's literally the threat. See, again, when people talk about these things, they aren't just saying that she feels physically threatened. What she means is that in an all-white space, she doesn't feel like she will be respected. That's what I understood her to be saying. But Matt wants to take everything at the most basic, literal interpretation and likely, I'm willing to bet, has cut out anything that might lead to another interpretation of what's being said there. So then we get to the comedy of this outrageous comedy, where he just goes on these long, completely improvised, not very funny rants. And it's actually really embarrassing. I got a legitimate secondhand cringe because throughout the film, people almost immediately figure out who Matt Walsh is, or at the very least that they're being pranked in some way, that he's some kind of paid actor or a prank show or a YouTuber or something. Like, people kind of get it pretty quickly because he's not subtle in what he's trying to do. But in this scene in particular, and in other ones, it's just kind of embarrassing because he really thinks he's doing something, but the only looks he's eliciting from those around him are of vague concern or annoyance. Like, they legitimately think something is wrong with this man. So at one point, he's playing up his whole undercover persona as a liberal soy boy or whatever, and he goes to have a cry because he's so overwhelmed by racism or whatever. And at this point, pretty much everybody goes like, is that Matt Walsh? Yeah, I think that's Matt Walsh. What the fuck? When he gets thrown out, he tries to say that he's on a journey of self-discovery and his racism, and they just keep asking him to leave. And she brings up a really great point when he tries to rebut that, saying he's on a journey. She just says, well, if you were really on a journey, if you really cared about anything we had to say, you wouldn't have lied to get in here, which is actually just a really great summation of this entire film. If he actually cared about genuine answers to questions around diversity and DEI and catching people in the act and putting people on the spot, he shouldn't have to lie and grift to do that journalism. So instead of taking any criticism to heart, he develops a foolproof costume, which is basically just this grandma-ass man bun wig. And we get a montage that ends with him being DEI certified. And then he just goes and introduces himself that way to people on the street. Like, he just literally goes and says, hey, I'm DEI certified, just to like 20 people on the street. And it's incredibly weird and awkward. These people are expectedly put off by someone in a very obvious wig and poor fitting beard shoving a camera crew in their face to ask about their whiteness. Also, something to note, the best laugh lines in the movie do not come from Matt Walsh or his antics. They come from people reacting to him and like telling him off and stuff with immaculate comedic timing. He then briefly interviews Sarah Tacola, one of many speakers he likes to highlight having a wide range of speaking fees. She apparently has speaking fees starting at $1,500. I'm sure that speaking fee has nothing to do with having a PhD and needing to eat food, but I honestly straight up do not care about the whole speaking fee thing. I don't. If someone didn't think they were worth it to talk on those subjects, people just wouldn't go see them. It's the same reason I don't seek out Nickelback or Oingo Boingo concerts. During this interview, he continually, obviously, is dodging and obfuscating. He latches onto a metaphor of the shadow person inside of him that she briefly says, and then just uses that little metaphor to completely derail the conversation into something silly where she was actually trying to illustrate a point for him. And then we cut to, for some goddamn reason, him camping out and having people sign a petition to rename the George Washington Monument after George Floyd, and he turns it into a black dick joke. The funny part here is the way he plays up his soy boy persona, saying that George Washington was problematic because he owned slaves. And that is literally, for the entire film, the most Matt Walsh or anybody associated with this film engages with the idea of historical racism, of structural racism in America, is just saying, yeah, George Washington owned slaves. Like, do you want to look at maybe some of the other founding fathers? Do you want to talk about how Thomas Jefferson, do you want to talk about what he did to a 14-year-old girl who ended up having his kids? Do you? I don't think you do, Matt. I don't think you do. See, again, they don't want to interact with any of the arguments about the founding fathers being racist, whose evils have been covered by the complicity of historians and structures made to run interference for the rich white men of the world, because if they engage with those, it would undermine their point. Another running theme of this entire operation. We then focus on Race to Dinner, a dinner-based workshop for racism. Again, he pulls up that they charge $5,000 for this. It's never made clear really where these costs come from, if it's kind of a pitch-in deal or just upfront. There are also some inconsistencies, like only one of the speakers, apparently charges $50,000. I would love to see the source on that, honestly. Now, this race to dinner scene is a prime example of how silly white liberal fears around diversity actually can be. You have overly reductive speakers literally teaching middle-aged white women that America is a racist Nazi hellscape, but they never actually talk about why, systemically, which leaves the viewer with the impression that these people are engaging at the most basic surface level of racism. See, maybe they do talk about the issue more in depth, and in fairness, I wouldn't expect Matt's team to have kept that in. This is yet another scene that is constantly edited around, and, say it with me one more time, if they showed the actual conversations, it would undermine the points they're trying to make. Also, every scene with Matt undercover goes on so long. He makes everyone uncomfortable. He's just interjecting into the space randomly. And like the other times before, people just kind of figured out he's an actor and like just suss him on the spot. So then he goes to a biker bar where he talks to these just regular old down-home Americans. Now, all these people don't seem to be racist and are telling stories about having black friends. The most interesting interview is with a guy who talks about how his dad and his granddad were in the Klan and how he doesn't hate people like that, which is all well and good. The problem taking this seriously is that I've met a lot of people, like personally, who have said they're not racist and then will say some really racist shit. Like I have family members who when I was a kid would say actual slurs and then would say, oh, I'm not racist, but. So this doesn't prove much. If they aren't racist, that's good for them. However, it's also an insight notably into what Matt and the crew think is a reliable source on racism and race relations, and that's white people, basically. Like, literally any white people is what Matt will take the word of. That's what this shows. Not even educated white people, not somebody who is educated in the matter, just literally any white person is who he'll take over like an educated black person. In fact, he goes to do some interviews with black people after this, and amazingly, they spend like less than half the time talking to a few assorted black people than they do talking to all the people in the bar. Like, they just basically skate over the black interviews just to say they put them in the movie. And then we talk to Jody Brown, a mother whose kids got in an incident that was televised about a mascot apparently not interacting with them, which I think is kind of, again, a little bit of a silly thing to make a big kerfuffle over. But again, Matt wants to make it seem like hate crimes don't happen over this, like holding this issue up as an example of what people all call hate crimes, which is not true at all. Now, we then get a collage of news pieces that pretty directly contradict Matt's assertion that like America's past racism or whatever he wants to say. But then he cleverly edits to tie that in to the Jussie Smollett case by conflating the two, actual hate crimes and actual hate crime statistics, with a well-known hoax. He wants to create for the viewer a sense that, oh, well, that might mean more, if not all hate crimes are hoaxes. By the way, in the past, Matt has argued that the term hate crime doesn't actually exist. Like it's a meaningless term because any crime can be done with hate. Now, the funny part about this is that while he's talking about how the media puppeteers behind everything are trying to pin racism on incidents like Jussie Smollett, he conveniently doesn't bring up that the entire reason we know that was a hoax was because of media. Then we talk to Wilford Riley, a professor who wrote a book about racism and racist hate crimes being a hoax, who basically thinks that a ton of prominent cases like Jussie Smollett didn't happen, which I'm sure some of them didn't. And then Matt reenacts the fake hate crime that happened to Jussie Smollett. And if you're wondering why, that is a fantastic question. I think this scene literally only exists for padding. Also, the Jussie Smollett case was 5 years ago. It was 5 years ago. It was 5 years ago, dude. Like, if you're trying to make the argument that stuff like that happens all the time, and the first example you can really come up with of a fake hate crime is 5 years ago, not making a great case, Matt. And then we get to the final boss the movie has been working towards the whole time, Robin DiAngelo. Now, she talks about doing workshops for big companies like Netflix. These things are not surprising. As a prominent voice in her field, she's going to be sought after for those kind of things, and she's probably going to get paid pretty handsomely for it. Now, here's the thing. This scene is really cut awkwardly so that it appears that she's kind of not really talking about or addressing much of anything. Also, that she doesn't actually say that much in this time period. When she does, you can kind of tell she's being purposefully edited to appear less coherent and out of context. Meanwhile, Matt is constantly tangling these very easy to understand ideas about systemic racism, and he pretends to get emotional at being overwhelmed. It just creates this very silly mixture of awkwardness. And then comes the crux of the scene that Matt is just so proud of, where he pays reparations to one of his black assistants and then goads her into doing the same thing. And the thing that they got on camera, which they probably actually should have cut, was that she says it's weird. She says it's really weird, and it weirds her out that he would just take money out of his pocket and pay reparations. Because she sees reparations as something that's systemic, right? Not as something that you just take money out and literally pay for. Now, this is meant as some sort of gotcha, right? Because she does it after being socially pressured by Matt. You see, Matt has exposed how ridiculous the DEI industry is by spending time and money concocting a series of elaborate schemes to set up fake interviews with people to socially pressure them. He's proven once and for all how these swindling profiteers are grifting by giving money to people. And then apparently Matt Walsh, as a certified DEI consultant, does a bunch of morning news spots showing off his workshop. And the twist here is meant to be that, oh, look at all the exposure he got for lying about his DEI credentials, which isn't actually that surprising. When you have a media team that can go out and lie on your behalf, yeah, you might get booked on some morning news shows. You lied about qualifications, so somebody thought you were qualified about something they aren't super knowledgeable about. It's not uncommon in any field. For example, someone who doesn't have qualifications to speak on something they might not be an expert in, or even educated in. Does that sound like anybody you know, Matt? Also noticeable is that I haven't seen any of these local news shows, which means if they played, they probably would have gone viral because it's Matt Walsh. So I'm thinking each one was cut before air. I have a little bit of experience in this. Having worked at a local NBC affiliate station for several years, I can actually speak on how packages are constructed a little bit. And generally, a lot of these kind of packages are pre-made. So specifically, they can get to the content they want in a short amount of time. They'll be edited together, packaged with ads, and put on the air, segmented into a certain time slot. Now, the fact that these didn't really make any waves virally tells me they probably were cut before then. So after this news segment, he holds his own little DEI workshop that they set up and invite apparently random people to. And like the previous times, Matt is immediately sussed out. Like almost immediately, people get up and walk out because they realize they're on like a prank show or something. He is so terrible. Like he is so bad at this. It's unbelievable they left some of this shit in the film. Like it's not funny. It just makes him look like an idiot. So he's intentionally making these ridiculous arguments and phrasings with no point, but to make everybody there look ridiculous. And the idea of DEI and diversity, ridiculous by extension. He's not trying to meaningfully illuminate or illustrate concepts like the workshops he's parodying. The workshops that he and his editors went to extensive lengths to edit to be out of context, to not actually address the deeper issues of systemic racism. Even as the movie edited around those courses, they had to keep in some of the more salient points. Like, those were integral to the arguments that people were making. They couldn't edit around all of it. Yet Matt is just being a silly dipshit here. And he relishes it to just embarrass himself and most everyone around him and make everyone leave out of what I can only describe, judging by the looks on their faces, as confused boredom. And then at the end of our long journey, he goes back to the coffee shop at the beginning and he tells the black waitress he awkwardly had an exchange with at the beginning that he's been doing the work, which she's confused about. And here's probably the most embarrassing part of the film, actually. See, Matt stands up and makes a speech in the middle, and this is all, of course, a fake vision in his head. But he makes the assertion that if America was really racist, we couldn't do anything to change it. And he literally stands up and tells everybody in the diner that racism in America isn't a problem. It's just race hustlers and con men who push race as an important factor. Something Matt literally does all the fucking time. And the entire diner applauds this grand fantasy where he's proving himself right. This is super embarrassing. Again, with a little self-awareness, there might actually be a funny point to be made here. But like Jeremy Boring in Lady Ballers, the Daily Wire crew can't really seem to look past themselves or see themselves in a joke. They always have to be right. Everybody always has to be wrong. And they've got the lack of research and out of context editing to prove it. So after all this, we finally get our answer. Is Matt Walsh racist? Yeah, undoubtedly so. If you don't believe me, I made 2 whole-ass videos looking at his entire career. And if you're a fan of his and want to argue with the fucking wall. I've watched more content of his than you. But even a broken clock can be right on occasion. So is there anything actually interesting to say about DEI in this movie? Fuck no. The most surprising thing about this movie is that Matt doesn't actually say the N-word in it, even though he gets close like 3 times. It's definitely true that there's a contingent of what I'd call woo-woo white liberals who feel some sort of self-imposed aggrievement at the racist past inflicted on people of color, but not me. It's the same brand of moderate that feels like every action can be a microaggression, that TikTok psychology diagnoses are worth listening to. I feel like people who adhere to ideas like those in white fragility are probably pretty well-meaning, just not very versed in the physical realities of the world around them. And yeah, sometimes the most well-meaning people are easy to sucker into scams. But that doesn't mean that speaking on racism or having a degree in racial studies is a hustle or a grift or an industry. And it certainly doesn't mean, as Matt not so subtly suggests, that there's basically no racism in America today, or that racism is all in the past. To me, if you want to tangibly try and stem the tide of modern racism, you have to be actively anti-racist. And that means examining your own biases, yes, but also the structures those biases are based in, like capital and law enforcement. And it is a far deeper conversation beyond that, one that I'm not really qualified, much like Matt Walsh, to tackle, but not for lack of learning or care, because something I've always genuinely strived for in my content, as with my life, has been to seek knowledge with empathy, to try and understand someone else's lived experiences. Matt Walsh doesn't have that empathy. He doesn't have the ability to try and understand that other people have faced systemic prejudices in modern America because he never has. He spent his whole career failing upwards as a mediocre white man with little personality, less style, and no qualifications. And unintentionally, that's kind of why the film succeeds, just not in the way he thinks. Matt thinks the point of the movie is that diversity in America doesn't matter, and that anyone can be successful, and that anyone who talks about racism is a liar and a grifter. But the point he actually proves is that the people benefiting from those structures of racism don't want to acknowledge it. People like him, which is why they have to lie, obfuscate, and set up elaborate pranks to convince their audiences that the people who talk about race, they're the real racists. But basically, this movie is exactly what you think it is. A propaganda piece that will be devoured by the already converted and likely won't do much for anybody who doesn't have an All Lives Matter bumper sticker or a mug that says liberal tears on it. And that's probably the greatest betrayal of this format to me, because if you're not even trying to actually explore and educate and learn something in a documentary, what's the point? Anyway, I have another review to record in God's Not Dead 5, Revengeance. So stay tuned for that. Also, god damn it, Dinesh D'Souza is putting out a movie at the end of the month. So the pain train keeps rolling. I am so tired.